I remember in May of 2012 when we were driving along the A82 road in Scotland and then across Rannochmoor, and for the very first time we saw Buccleuch Moor, which is just this magnificent, majestic and iconic triangular shaped mountain in Glencoe. And it was absolutely gorgeous, it just took our breath away, it really did. And the weather was nothing like what you would typically expect from Scotland. It was clear blue sky, it was calm, it was unseasonably warm, and just a stunning time to be in Glencoe. And we were there for a very special reason. We wanted to celebrate Adele's 30th birthday, but I had something even more special in mind. And one particular morning we started a hike up Buccleuch Beg, which is a sister mountain to Etive Moor. So we headed up this very steep-sided mountain, got to the first ridge, turned right to get to our destination summit, and we got there and we were just rewarded with these fantastic views down into Glen Etive and the loch beyond. And it was a gorgeous morning, it was incredibly still, it just felt as if we had the whole mountain to ourselves. And what I always do when we do these walks is to carry my camera and a tripod. I set my camera up with a 10-second timer, I run over to Adele, I put my arm around her, we get our shot and our memory and moment of being there. But this time was a little bit different. I set up the camera with a 10-second timer, I ran over, but instead I got down on one knee and proposed. And this is probably the best timed photograph I've ever taken. Just captured the moment perfectly where Adele put her hands up to her mouth as she gasped with shock. And she did say yes, which is fortunate, otherwise I probably would have had to quietly just push her off the side of the mountain. But yeah, it was a very special moment, and after that we just relaxed on this top of this mountain. It just felt as if we had miles and miles to ourselves. It was fantastic. So from that moment, Glencoe became a very special place to us. So after that, I took a turn for the worse with my back, and I had to kind of give up mountain biking, which is things I've talked about before. But essentially, as photography replaced my mountain biking, I just felt as if I needed my first trip away, my first dedicated photography trip. So naturally, I decided to go to Glencoe like lots of photographers do. So after a few days of exploring Glencoe, this is what I came up with, and I absolutely love this image. I like it just as much now as what I did when I captured it back in 2015. And it represents the first significant turning point in my photography because it really heightened my appreciation for the importance of composition. And I knew that after capturing this, that I felt as if it was a composition that made the image successful, and that was a skill that I wanted to develop and strive to improve moving forward. Now, I think for me, anyone can shoot good conditions, anyone can shoot great light, but to use all the different elements in the scene together to create a compelling composition, and I think that's a sign of a skill in photography. But composition is subjective in itself. In very basic terms, it's an aesthetic that's a combination of colour, form and light, but it can also represent a mood, a feeling, an emotion. But I think in order to achieve an emotion through composition, then it requires a more deeper understanding and connection with the landscape and the subjects that you're trying to capture. Because I think, we're constantly fed these ideas and these rule of thirds and leading lines and foreground, midground, background. But if we try to shoehorn these ideas and these rules into our images, then perhaps we kind of losing the point of why we even taking the image in the first place. Whereas if we have a deeper understanding of the subjects and what they mean to us and the importance that they play in the scene and within the landscape, I think if we understand it, then we can care. And if we care, then we have that deeper connection. Then the landscape and the subjects in themselves, they can help dictate to us what the composition should be, rather than us enforcing our own preconceived ideas of what good composition should be. And that's essentially what I tried to do here, was to spend some time really kind of soaking in the atmosphere, looking at the subjects, trying to make them work together, trying to read the light, the mood, piece all the elements together into a composition which for me kind of represents my experience of being there, my whole feeling that I got from Glencoe. And yeah, I really do like this, and it also increased my appreciation for different forms of light, moody weather, more inclement conditions. So I came away from this trip feeling very inspired and with a real focus on wanting to get out into my local landscape, challenge myself with compositions within my local landscape, and a real kind of appreciation for all the little details and nuances that make up composition. Which is probably why I spent so much time at the end of 2015 and in early 2016 going out into my local landscape with just a 55mm lens on my camera, because heading out into a chaotic environment with a fixed focal length really made things a significant challenge, but it's that challenge which I felt helped me to really improve my eye for composition and what I believe good composition is. So like I said, Glencoe really gave me this newfound appreciation for more moody and atmospheric conditions, and I think it was only about a month after my trip to Glencoe I captured this image, and I absolutely love it. And you might recall I mentioned it very briefly in one of my early videos when I was shooting a hoarfrost on the North York Moors. Absolutely magical conditions. But I recall showing this photograph to Adele for the very first time, and I said, "Oh, what do you think?" And she said, "It's a bit miserable." And she's absolutely right. She's hit the nail on the head. It is miserable, it's very somber, but it's a good example of the types of images that I was taking at the time. And I remember posting it on Flickr, and this guy left this single word comment which was exemplary. I was like, oh, what a really nice compliment to leave. So I had a look at his profile and he had some fantastic work on there. So I thought, well, what's made him really like this photograph? Is it the composition? Is it the mood? Is there something else in the scene which he can relate to? And I really wanted to understand it because I was really trying to understand my own photography as well at the same time. So I thought having the perspective from somebody else might help me understand my own point of view. So I kept going back to this scene, looking at it, and I was frequenting my kind of local area on a very regular basis because I was going to these places because they made me feel better. And this particular day I was stood here looking at the scene and not in a good place whatsoever. I was feeling a bit down, troubles with my back pain, etc. And I was looking at the scene and everything just clicked into place. It suddenly dawned on me that the reasons why I was taking images like this, which were very somber and moody and melancholic, was that that's a reflection of how I was feeling at the time. You've got this really quite sort of lonely, sad looking tree in the landscape with the landscape crumbling around it and these foggy conditions, not really being able to look very far ahead in front of you. And when I realised that actually some of these images were just a reflection of how I was feeling and my emotional state at the time, I thought, well, that's it. It's, I'm taking these images because I'm emotionally invested, not only in drawn to a particular subject, but I'm emotionally invested in the locations. And that was a very significant turning point. And from that moment forth, it was very important to me, not necessarily to try and portray an emotion through my imagery, but to spend time in the places which made me feel better. To go to my local area, invest time there, get to know it, build up an intimate knowledge, and stick to the places and locations which had a profound effect on how I was feeling physically and emotionally. And I think that really helped to see a fairly swift turnaround in my photography and helped to give it more direction and feeling and kind of integrity, but also my own very personal view of the landscape and the things that I really enjoyed at that moment. And that brings me on very nicely to this photograph, which you might recognise. It did quite well in a national competition. It's called Guardians of the Forest. And I called it Guardians of the Forest because I see it as this gateway into this environment where I feel most relaxed, content and happy. And I do really like this image, and I was very fortunate to capture it as well. It was captured in Wales in 2016. And I was there with a group of other photographers on one particular afternoon when the conditions weren't very good. It was quite overcast and flat. And I spotted these two oak trees and they just stopped me in my tracks. I looked at the scene, loved everything about it instantly. It's the symmetry of the oak trees, the moss-covered branches, the natural vignette and framing of the pine trees to the left and the right. I could visualize something much more magical. So we went back to the hotel that evening and I could not get the scene out of my head. I just felt compelled to go back and try and make it work. So the next morning when when the whole group went in one direction, I went left in the opposite direction on my own, which that sounds like a really selfish thing to do, but I needed my fix. I wanted to have some solitude, spend some time on my own in the forest, and I felt obligated to go back and see if I could make the scene work. And boy, was I lucky, because this combination of light and mist, I would have to wait I don't know how long to see that locally. So to be there on my second visit and for the sun rays to be perfectly complementary to the position of the physical elements in the scene, it was absolutely magical. It really was a very special moment and great time to be out in the forest. But the reason why it's a significant turning point is because it really gave me an increase in confidence. Confidence is important, but it can be very difficult to find that confidence sometimes. So if we go back to that previous image where this guy left this really nice compliment, I found it very difficult just to accept it. Instead I was wanting to analyze it, and I was being very self-critical of my own work. I wanted to be good, I wanted to excel, and I wanted to keep driving things forward. But I think there's a very fine line between having too much confidence or being too self-critical to the point that it can be crippling to our own progression. So I think this image kind of allowed me to start moving forward again, because it had some very nice feedback from some photographers that I highly respect, but they explained to me why they liked it and why it worked for them. So I think that kind of really reaffirmed the path that I was on, so that I should, stick to my guns, keep shooting trees, keep going to the places which just felt right to me. And I think if we've got something that we love and we put it out there into the public domain, and we're not feeling that love back, then that shouldn't make us feel any different about it. We shouldn't be deterred or disillusioned. We should just accept that everybody's got different tastes. And I think what's more important and more sustainable for the future is that if we just have faith in what we're doing, and so long as we feel good about it and we can look at an image and still feel that emotional connection to it, then that's the most important thing for me. So yeah, that was a significant turning point. And I think those three have worked really quite well together for me. Now, I couldn't talk about turning points without quickly making reference to a couple of images which I think have really benefited from this reflection and really appreciating and understanding these turning points and very positive moments in my work. And this is a scene which you might recognize. It was in my very first video. This is a different version of it, a version which has done very well for me. It won a category in Outdoor Photographer of the Year last year, which was really nice to get some of my local work recognized like that. But I do believe that this has really very much benefited from my appreciation for composition, and also having an understanding and appreciation for the subjects and empathy for the scene, and helping that dictate to me what the composition should be. But also emotion, because I'm very emotionally invested in this particular location. It's kind of got a little bit of melancholy feel to it as well, like my older work. But also confidence as well. I've always had confidence in this scene. In fact, a couple of people have said to me, "Oh, I don't really like that," but my feelings for it have never wavered. We've got a 40-inch print of this on our lounge wall. And I also did a print swap with a world-renowned photographer recently, someone who I highly respect. And he chose this image, and he's got it on his office wall, which is a real privilege for me. And I feel very, very proud of that, to be honest. And moving on from this one, I've got to talk about this tree. It's an all-time favourite. And just like the previous image, it encompasses so many things that I like about woodland. It's not just about the subjects, but just woodland in itself, the mood, the atmosphere, the sounds, the smells, the wildlife. And this particular location and this subject, it just oozes with mood. And I don't know, maybe it feels wrong to celebrate this dead oak tree that's been choked of life by this commercial plantation. But I don't think that should really stop us from taking pictures of these things, because the mood and shape in this is just fantastic. And when it's foggy, the light just gets sucked down through the canopy and illuminates these mossy branches. I just absolutely love it. But what I really appreciate in this one is this feeling of exploration in woodland. And it's only exploration on a very small scale, but when it results in finds like this, it's an incredibly good feeling. So yeah, I'm very fond of this. It's my logo, it's my embossing stamp, and it is one of those images which again has been an accumulation of all this journey that I've been on, and appreciating that journey as well. So why is it important to reflect and understand these significant turning points in our photography? Well, for you it might not be, because you could just go and enjoy the great outdoors and take pictures of things purely and simply because you like the look of them. Of course, that's okay. But for me personally, I feel as if I've really benefited from taking this slightly deeper view, because I want to understand where my photography's come from, why I've followed a certain path, why I've chosen woodland, why I've chosen particular subjects, perhaps why I've regressed or progressed in the past. But I think if we understand the reasons why, then we can make a more informed decision about how we want to take our photography forward, about the places where we want to go and shoot, the message that we want to get across, the stories that we want to tell, and really just try and find our own voice in our photography. But I think whatever the reasons, the most important thing is to just enjoy it, feel comfortable in our own skin and confident in the images that we're creating. But for now, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please leave a comment below. I'd love to know about your turning points, and I read every single comment. They're very much appreciated. But I hope you've enjoyed this episode, or it's been interesting or been of benefit in some way. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you for the next one.